So today we are going to be tackling eyeshadow palettes, and this video looks different than the other ones. I have chosen to actually stay in my beauty room and actually film out of my drawers for this collection because I thought it would be easier. I'm not sorting by color category. We are going to tackle high-end first and drugstore second. I thought it would be easier for me to just pull palettes out one by one, talk about them, show them to you, and then move on from there versus dragging all of these out and trying to lay them out on my little table. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to show you guys each of the palettes. I will probably do a couple of swatches of certain shades that I love or things that I wanted to call out poor pigmentation on, etc. But unlike the other videos where I've literally swatched every single thing, this is going to be next to impossible to do in a palette drawer like this. But for the most part, we're just going to be focusing on, is it a palette I like? Is it a palette I use? Is it one I want to keep, and why? And then moving on from there. So hopefully that's okay with you guys. If there is any particular palettes that you want a more detailed blog post on, or more information on, or detailed swatches on, absolutely leave them down below. A lot of these are common palettes I think that a lot of beauty people have in their collection, so I don't necessarily think they're going to be ones that you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what that looks like. Show me swatches. So I ramble at the mouth. Let's go ahead and get started. First up, this is the Too Faced Stardust palette. This is by Vegas Nay. This was one of the first palettes I bought from Too Faced, to be totally honest. I had never really been drawn to the chocolate bars. I now own a couple of them, but I hadn't been really drawn to them. This one I really love. I hate that it was a limited edition. I know limited edition Too Faced palettes got a lot of crap. This one is gorgeous in my opinion. You have 3 matte shades here. You've got some really interesting sort of neutral bronzy shades here and a nice satin here. You've got an interesting pink, a purple that's not bad, another interesting sort of burgundy matte down here, a black matte, and then a gold shimmer. So I really like this palette. I thought it was really well thought out. Of all the Too Faced collab palettes that have come out, I believe this is the only one I own, and I think it is totally worth the money. I used this a crap ton for months and months and months. I haven't used it in a while, mostly because I have been testing a lot of palettes, as well as I just have a lot. So this is one that I thoroughly love and really don't want to keep. Just to give you a couple of examples though, I find that the mattes are, let's see if I can do this. Put this here. There we go, that works. So that is the shade Millennial. It's a really pretty matte shade. This shade here, Starlight, is gorgeous. Super metallic and foiled. This shade called the Strip is got a glitter in it, so you do have to be careful because you can get some fallout with it, but it is a really pretty sort of foiled silvery pink. And the shade Golden Nugget is kind of the same formula. It's not my favorite gold, to be honest. I think that Gold Nugget is probably my least favorite shade in the palette. Okay, keeping this guy. Okay, so before I grab the next palette and keep going, one thing I didn't call in the intro that I want to mention now is a little silly, but eyeshadow palettes are my weakness. So of all the makeup products that come out, of all the things that are in my collection, the thing that always makes me the happiest is my eyeshadow palettes. I feel like that is where I am the most creative. It is where I like to have the most fun with my makeup looks. The colors that different brands combined together really do inspire me. So I will probably not be as harsh with this decluttering as I have been in past declutterings because I really do enjoy my eyeshadow palettes. And unlike cream products, they tend to have a little bit longer of a shelf life. There is my little asterisk to this video, which says I may not get rid of as many palettes as some people would want me to, or as previous declutters would lead you to believe as far as percentages that I plan to declutter. So, alright, next up is the Urban Decay Gwen Stefani palette. This was limited edition. I think this is probably still the most beautiful packaging that Urban Decay has ever done. Up until recently, I've heard you had actually been able to find some of these palettes at, I think it was at Nordstrom Rack is where people were seeing these. It has a giant mirror at the top here. And then it has, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it has 15 shades in here. These were all very neutrals and there were a lot of mattes. And so I think a lot of people were expecting the Gwen Stefani palette to be like really bright and colorful. And in reality, this is a very neutral palette. It reflects how she wears makeup, which is very light on her eyes and bright red lips. So she doesn't do a ton of sort of punk color eye looks. That's just not her vibe. I do think this has a nice selection of mattes, has a nice selection of shimmers as well. It looks like a lot of these shades are super, super similar in the pan, especially these first 3. And I think that kind of turned some people off. But I would argue that what she's done is made some satin shades that have different undertones. So you have a pinky sort of hollow undertone, a gold, and then your traditional sort of champagne nude as well. So I actually really did enjoy this palette. So let's swatch Baby and Steady here so you can see. I thought the pigmentation was nice, unlike a lot of Urban Decay palettes that have some chunky shades that don't work very well. I thought all of these actually did perform, with the exception of maybe this pop shade, which required, in my opinion, a glitter base to really, or sticky base to make it work. But I thought they all had a place in the palette. I really did like her selection of nude transition shades. You had a more cool toned one, a sort of neutral blending shade. You had this really pretty burgundy shade, and then you had a couple fun pops of color in Harajuku, which was this pink, and blue, which was Danger. All in all, I like this palette. It's one that I would actually like to pull out and play with a little bit more. Also for sentimental reasons, this is one that I don't see myself decluttering because I love Gwen Stefani. I have ever since I was in high school. She's just kind of a culture icon that I've always loved, so I will definitely be keeping this in my collection. All right, up next, this is a MAC palette. This is a MAC 15 pan eye palette. This was the Nordstrom C'est Chic palette. This came out as part of their, I think it was this Nordstrom's anniversary sale last fall. This is an all matte palette. It's got a nice sort of warm shades here, some cooler shades here with like plums and pinks in this row, and then sort of gray, different shades of like, I would say grays and almost khaki colors down here leading into blacks. For some reason, I just am not reaching for this a ton. I don't know. I like all matte palettes. I have several that I use quite a lot. It's not that they're not pigmented. They are. I mean, they have a nice texture. I mean, those are pretty shades. I don't know, just for some reason, I reach for other palettes over this, and I can't quite figure out why. But I do think I'm gonna pass this on. I just feel like, I don't know, I don't really have a clear explanation for why I don't reach for this palette, but I do think that I have a friend who would really probably enjoy this. She likes matte shadows a lot, and I know she likes MAC, so this was also limited edition, so you can't get it anymore. It was a Nordstrom exclusive, I think, just for the sale, so yeah, I think I'm going to pass this one on to a friend. I think it'll get more love with her. Alright, so up next I have two Kat Von D palettes. This is the Metamorphosis palette. This one is not available anymore. It was gorgeous, so it had a mirror at the top, and then similar to the Shade and Light palette, so they were kind of divided almost like into quads, as it were. I'm torn on this palette. I'm torn on this palette for a couple of reasons. One, it's a limited edition palette, so if you guys can't get it anymore, I can't talk about it on the blog or recommend it. This shade in the middle here, though, is flipping stunning. Like one of the most beautiful sort of pewtery light taupe shades known to man. I mean, it's insanely foiled. I mean, just gorgeous. These two, this pink and then this deeper silver, same thing. Like, you cannot beat the pigmentation on this palette. I mean, this cream is fine. It's just a basic matte cream. This shade is a little weird to me. It's a lighter, sort of whiter base, but it has white or silver glitter in it, so I never quite got on board with this shade just because of the glitter in it. This is a beautiful brown color. I love this sort of dark chocolate brown, but I have this. I didn't care for this Rust shade, to be honest. It was just okay in my book. It's one of those mattes that has like glitter in it. Never a fan of that formula from any brand, to be totally honest. This gold was okay, but it's not my favorite gold undertone. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm torn. I like this middle quad and I like this shade. If I could keep this middle quad, I probably would hang on to this palette, but I'm not really reaching for this. So I do think, oh, watch me waver. Okay, I do think I'm gonna go ahead and declutter this one. This is my Shade and Light Eye palette. I love this palette. When I talk about matte palettes that I reach for, this is definitely one of them. I absolutely love this taupe shade here in the middle. It's probably one of my favorite transition shades. I love the neutrals here, the more cool tones in the center, and the warm tones here. I do grungy looks in the fall with this in the crease and this all over the eye and this to deepen all the time. I just think it is a really, really great matte palette with really beautiful pigmentation. Try filming with a dog who likes to bark out the window. Okay, sorry, I was mid-swatching when he started barking. So just want to swatch a few. This is my, like I said, my favorite taupe shade. It's just beautiful. I love it. I think it's just a really pretty transition shade on me. I love this sort of rusty shade in the fall time. Like I said, beautiful pigmentation. These do kick up a little bit of powder when you use them, but I don't get fallout with them, to be totally honest. Yeah, I just think this is a beautiful palette, and I love all the colors in here, so definitely keeping it. Okay, now we get into Urban Decay land. The first is my Urban Decay Naked. This was probably my first high-end palette. It was the gateway palette, as I call it. I used the heck out of this for many, many years. I am close to hitting pan on Virgin. This is the palette I actually pulled out on my wedding day. I wore all matte shades. I wore Buck and Naked primarily on my eyes. I kept my eye makeup pretty neutral that day. So I actually had Naked all over my eye and Buck kind of blended into the crease with some liner. So I have very sentimental attachment to this palette. I know a lot of people have come back and said they don't love it as much anymore. I personally really like this palette, if I'm being very honest. I like the layout of it. I like the formula of the two matte shades that are in here. I know people complain about Sidecar because it has like glitter specks in it that can cause some fallout, but I really love this, especially over like sticky bases. Half Baked is still one of my favorite go-to gold colors. I love Smog for brown smoky eye, and then Dark Horse to deepen up the smoky eye. I love that they've got kind of these plummy pink colors down here. Toasted is still one of my favorite all over lid colors, and I love Hustle. So I love this palette. I would totally recommend it. I know a lot of people have been on an Urban Decay, like, I don't like Urban Decay palettes. I love the looks I get with this, and I really love the Naked One palette. Just being honest. I'm hanging on to it. Urban Decay Naked 2 is probably my favorite palette, and it looks like I've not used it, and that is because I've actually repurchased this palette. So I hit pan on several shades. I did have Chopper fall out, and I love Chopper so much it made me sad. So I think when there was a point sale, I went and recently repurchased this. This is probably one of my favorite palettes that Urban Decay ever did, and I feel like I hear people say this is either their favorite Urban Decay palette or it's one they don't like. Chopper is a shade that has a little bit of that glitter in it, so it works better over a sticky base in my opinion, but it is beautiful. One of my favorite things to do is to put Verve all over the all over my eye, and Pistol kind of in the crease, or sorry, in the corner. I don't subscribe to the fact that you have to wear a matte shade every day. I do frequently blend out with a matte, but there are plenty of times where I've just slapped Verve all over my eyes for some brightness, and then blended this sort of pewtery, really interesting sort of pewter gray-green color, which is the shade Pistol here, into the corner. And I love that combo, and I've walked out the door and felt totally fantastic. I love this YDK shade. It's just this beautiful sort of plummy metallic shade. I do think the shade Tease, it is I think the only matte in here. No, I lie. There's a cream matte Foxy, and then Tease and Blackout. Those are your mattes here, but I think Tease is the perfect color to have included in this palette to blend into the crease. So if you're obsessed with having a crease shade, you've got it. So I really love this palette. I also love that they duplicated and put Half Baked in this palette. I know they got some flack for putting this shade in the first and the second palette, but quite frankly, I love that it's in here because I love this gold shade. So this is definitely probably my favorite Urban Decay palette. But as you'll see, I actually like 1, 2, and 3 quite a bit. Alright, so this is the Urban Decay Naked 3. This one also got a lot of flack. I feel like it got a lot of flack and a lot of people who didn't like it, in large part because they were disappointed with this rose gold shade. This rose gold shade was one of those ones that I think drew everyone into this palette, and then it really didn't perform very well. I find that I can get decent pigmentation with it when I use a wet brush, or even my finger, or put it over a sticky base. So I can get it to work. I have plenty of times, but it was a little disappointing to me. I love this shade Buzz here. It's a pink color. It really does depend with this palette. Do you enjoy pinky tone shades? If you do, you'll like this palette. If you don't, you might not. I think it's got a good thought process for a white, a limit, and neuter as your mattes here. I've actually done an all matte look with these 3 colors and have loved it. I love the shade Liar. So I've heard 2 complaints about this palette. I've heard it that you end up with the same look no matter what you wear, and then also the other complaint I've heard is that the shadows don't perform. I really like it. I wish they had not done black heart. This is one of those black bases with like a burgundy glitter. I never use shades like this. I really wish they had just put like a gray or a black matte in here instead. But other than that, I really do love this palette. I've used the heck out of it. So yeah, hanging on to it. All right, this is the Urban Decay Naked Smoky. The packaging on this is stunning. I love it. It's kind of clear on the back here, and then does this really cool smoky haze effect on the front. They did go ahead and include a lot more mattes in this, so these 4 down at the end are all of your matte shades. The biggest challenge I have with this is that there's not a transition shade, so it goes from 2 very light shades to 2 very dark shades. So I really have to mix these 2 together and be very careful if I want a true transition shade, which with a smoky palette, I absolutely want. I saw a lot of tutorials where they told you to just go straight into whiskey, into your crease and transition. That is way too dark for me. Maybe it works for someone who's tanner. I just don't get that inspired when I use it. And I feel like it can make smoky looks with a lot of other ones. I don't love this one. The other ones bring me inspiration, get me excited. This one just doesn't. It could be that I don't wear a ton of like really full-on smoky eyes. Although I am a bit of a, oh, I want the whole collection kind of girl, I do think I'm gonna pass this one on. It's just not my fave. This is my IT Cosmetics Naturally Pretty palette. This is pretty new to my collection. I think I picked this up at the last Ulta sale. This is an all matte palette with a transforming pearl shade down here that in theory you could plop over the top of any of these to make them shimmers. I don't know. It doesn't really do it for me when I use it that way, to be honest. I have used this as an inner corner highlight. I have used it all over the lid before and it's fine. But I really do like the colors that are in here. These do perform softly. And by softly, I don't mean that they're not pigmented. They absolutely are pigmented. Sorry, I'm trying to get an angle here that shows it. There you go. They are absolutely pigmented, but they just have a softer texture to them. They look a little bit more soft and romantic on the eyes. And I find this to be a very wearable palette for work situations where I want an all matte look. So I think these sunrise, sunset colors are beautiful. I love that they included a pink and a violet. You've got your traditional browns here. You've got even some really interesting transition shades that are more cool toned or warm toned. So I really feel like you could go completely cool toned, completely warm, or completely neutral all in one palette, and I don't find that very often. So this is an all matte palette that I actually would 100% recommend, especially if you're someone who is looking for a matte palette that you're going to wear to work. So I'm going to keep this one. To jump ahead a little bit, just so I can keep some of my brands together here. This is the Mere Minerals. This is the Nudes palette. This I've barely used, if I'm being totally honest. I think I picked this up on a sale. There's nothing wrong with this palette. The only shade I don't really love is this shade down here, which is cream with a silvery white glitter in it. I just don't love, like I've said, I may say it 5 more times, matte shadows with a glitter in them. Totally useless to me. I don't like shades like that. I don't know. Something about this one just doesn't call to me the way that some of my other neutral palettes do. It's so new. I just think I'm going to find a better home for it, because I do think when I want an everyday neutral palette, several palettes come to mind, and it probably won't be this one I reach for. The quality in here is totally there. Totally there. So there's nothing wrong with these palettes. In fact, I think the Bare Minerals eyeshadows are really nice, but I think I can find a better home for this. Okay, let's talk about my Too Faced palettes. Chocolate Bar and Bonbons, and I'm also going to pull one from the back here. All right, so let's start with this little baby guy. This is the only 9 pan I own. It is the Natural Eyes. Most of the color selections in the other ones just didn't appeal to me, but this is a really nice, easy, compact palette for work situations. I actually think that I like all of the shades that are in here. I love that it's got a matte shade, a matte cream shade, a really pretty sort of neutral transition shade. You've got 2 more matte shades here. So you've really got a full collection of shades that go from light to dark and a matte perspective. And then I love Silk Teddy and Push Up and Honey Pot. You can see they're just really pretty shades. I think it's a really easy, compact travel palette for work situations, so I like this one. I'm gonna hang on to it. So this is the Too Faced Chocolate Bonbons palette. This was the first Too Faced palette I bought in this chocolate bar series. I love this one. I really, really, really do. I think you've got a nice collection of cools, but I also think you've got this nice neutrals down here to do a very neutral look with. I really love this Bordeaux shade. I think it's a really pretty sort of burgundy look. These pink shades are actually a lot of fun. I found really fun ways to use both of these. This Earl Grey shade is amazing. So many times when you get these darker teals, when you put them on the eyes, they just look like a washed out black. This Earl Grey shade actually stays looking teal on the eyes when you use it. And I think that is so hard to do. This Satin Sheets is gorgeous. It's almost a little duochromy with a shift from sort of pearl to gold. This Molasses Chip is definitely stunning. Probably one of my favorite all over lid shades. And then this shade here, Cafe au Lait, it looks like I've got a little bit of a hard pan on here. I think it's because I wetted my brush a little bit last time. This shade is one of those ones that does have the glitter in it, so I like to put this over a sticky base. But it has decent pigmentation on its own. It's a really pretty taupe with shimmer in it. So I love that all over the lid. Out of the 2 I own, it's definitely my favorite, so keeping it. This is the Chocolate Bar palette. I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth whether or not I wanted Chocolate Bar or Semi-Sweet. I ultimately went for the Chocolate Bar, and part of me thinks I should have gone for the Semi-Sweet. So I like this palette. I know this is a lot of people's holy grail palette. I think the thing I struggle with is I almost always end up with the same look, because I feel like I put either hazelnut or milk chocolate in my crease, and then I put usually hot chocolate and maybe a little amaretto into the corners to blend out, and then I use one of these 3 shades on my lid, usually one of these 2. I just feel like I get a lot of the same looks. This cherry or this strawberry bonbon shade is just okay. I've never really figured out how to use it, to be honest. This Candied Violet shade is kind of meh in my opinion. As you can see, it's just glitter and not a lot of pigmentation to it either. And then Black Forest Truffle is another one of those like super matte glittery shades that doesn't have a lot of pigmentation to it. It's lots of fallout with it. So, you know, I've already magically got 3 shades in here that I don't really love. Champagne Truffle is beautiful. Marzipan is stunning. Creme Brulee is stunning. They really are legitimately beautiful. As you can see there. So am I going to keep this? Yes. Do I want to keep playing around with it? Sure. Do I feel like I might like the chocolate bonbons, or the semi-sweet, sorry, better? Potentially, because the more I've stared at it, the more I realize that palette really has both warm and cool looks, and this is more warm and neutral looks. I may wait for a sale or a points deal at Ulta and pick up semi-sweet and just kind of really compare these 2 and talk about why you may want one or the other, because I have a really hard time choosing between the 2 of them, and I'm still not convinced I chose appropriately. So yeah, take that for what it's worth. All right, so let's talk about my Lorac palettes here. I have 1, 2, 3. We'll get to those in just a second. And then I also have Unzipped. Unzipped is probably one of my favorite palettes of all time. I love these sort of warm, plummy, rose gold, burgundy shades that are in here. They're really complimentary on blue eyes. All of these colors really make my eyes pop. I love Unconditional and Unspoken as mattes. This Undercover shade is gorgeous. These are beautiful. This is a beautiful burgundy for the corner. Now, like Lorac, mattes. These do kick up a little bit of powder, so I would say shadows like Lorac and Anastasia, they have a little bit of kick up when you put your brush in the pan with the mattes, but they blend out like a dream. And if you tap off your brush, you really don't, I don't have any fallout at least. But I'm just saying, these metallics are freaking stunning. They are so metallic, so pretty. I can't say enough great things about this. All right, so I own 1, 2, and 3 of the Lorac Pros. I really do love this formula. It's one of my favorites. I actually bought Lorac 2 first. We'll get to that. And then I came back and bought the first one. I know this is some people's holy grail palette. I love this. I think the shades are gorgeous. There's absolutely nothing wrong with any of the shades in this palette. This palette doesn't get as much love for me because it doesn't have a good transition shade. There's not a shade, with the exception of maybe Mauve, and I don't always want to go Mauve in my transition, that this is too dark, this is too dark, and these are too dark. Light pink, I really wish they had gotten rid of light pink and had put in more of a lighter transition shade. Because I'm really missing this in this palette, and I have to either try and blend cream and taupe together to try and get something that's transitional, or I have to reach for another palette. It's funny how just missing that one shade really messes with my head with this palette. A few examples. I mean, pigment is phenomenal, like no complaints. This is high quality Lorac eyeshadows. It does, like I said with the last shadow, same thing here, offer some powdery kickback on the mauves, but they're super pigmented, so I don't mind that. Yeah, so I'm gonna keep this one for sure. It's not my favorite. I know this is a lot of people's favorite. It's not mine. Okay, ironically, the one that is my favorite is probably some people's least favorite, although I have heard a lot of people say that the Lorac Pro 2 is their favorite. This one, in my mind, is really great because and everyone says this is a cool tone palette, this is a cool tone palette. Well, okay, yes, there are some cool tone shades in here with the purple and the blue, and even that green down there. But I would argue that if you covered up those purple shades down there, this all of a sudden starts to look like a much more neutral palette. It has a really great transition shade Nectar, which is very warm toned. So you can do a very warm toned look by putting Nectar in the crease and one of these two shades, Mocha or Rosé, on the eyes, and then blending out with a black or a cocoa brown down there. So I feel like this has a lot of diversity to be neutral or cool, and I like also the thought process for sometimes doing a little bit of warmth with a cooler eyeshadow, because I think it looks really pretty. If you're gonna do us all over silver eye, I really do like pulling in more of a neutral or a sort of warmer shade into my crease as a point of differentiation, I guess is what I'm gonna say. This chrome shade is freaking stunning. This mocha shade is amazing. Rosé is stunning. This plum is beautiful. So yeah, I really love this palette. I think it is my favorite out of all of them. It's one that I've reached for quite a bit. So yeah, I'm definitely hanging on to this. And then this is the Lorac Pro 3. I wasn't sure about this one when I first got it, if I'm being totally honest. I was totally drawn to this medallion shade, and it kind of sucks. It's different than any of the other ones. It's got that chunky glitter in it. I mean, it's not bad. My hand is a little wet as I apply that, so it actually looks pretty, but I do think this requires a base, and I also think this requires finger application to get sort of this really pretty foiled look that you're seeing right now. I don't think this medallion shade works with a brush on its own, but I really love the range of colors that they put in here for mattes. Good transition colors, good mid-tone colors. This terracotta is a really interesting sort of yellow-based shade. This one goes a little bit more warm toned. This is a very cool taupe color. You've got these really pretty amethyst shades down here. You've got the white and the black that a lot of people want. I would put this as number 2 in my favorites. So Pro 2 is my favorite, 3 is probably second place, and original is actually in third place for me.